Let's take a look at the main stories around the world, where in Washington, D.C., President Donald Trump has renewed his unfounded claims that Democrats were trying to steal the election from him. He did not back up his claim with any details or evidence. Mr. Trump spoke from the White House briefing room last night, unleashing harsh criticism of pre-election polling and showed him trailing Democrats Joe Biden and claiming without evidence that the ballot counting process is unfair and corrupt.
Good evening. I'd like to provide the American people with an update on our efforts to protect the integrity of our very important 2020 election. If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us. If you count the votes that came in late, we're looking at them very strongly, but a lot of votes came in late. I've already decisively won many critical states, including massive victories in Florida, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio. To name just a few, we won these and many other victories despite historic election interference from big media, big money, and big tech. As everybody saw, we won by historic numbers. And the pollsters got it knowingly wrong. They got it knowingly wrong. We had polls that were so ridiculous, and everybody knew it at the time. There was no blue wave that they predicted. They thought there was going to be a big blue wave. That was false. It was done for suppression reasons. But instead, there was a big red wave. And it's been properly acknowledged, actually, by the media. They were, I think, very impressed. But that was after the fact. That doesn't do us any good. There are now only a few states yet to be decided in the presidential race. The voting apparatus of those states are run in all cases by Democrats. We were winning in all the key locations by a lot, actually. And then our numbers started miraculously getting whittled away in secret. And they wouldn't allow legally permissible observers. We went to court in a couple of instances, and we were able to get the observers put in. And when the observers got there, they wanted them 60, 70 feet away, 80 feet, 100 feet away, or outside the building to observe people inside the building. And we won a case, a big case, and we have others happening. There are lots of litigation, even beyond our litigation. There's tremendous amount of litigation generally because of how unfair this process was. And I predicted that. I've been talking about mail-in voting for a long time. It's really destroyed our system. It's a corrupt system. And it makes people corrupt even if they aren't by nature. But they become corrupt. It's too easy. Our goal is to defend the integrity of the election. We'll not allow the corruption to steal such an important election, or any election for that matter. And we can't allow anybody to silence our voters and manufacture results. I've been doing a lot of public things for a long time. I've never had anything that's been as inspirational, by people calling, talking, sending things to us. I've never seen such love and such affection and such spirit as I've seen for this. People know what's happening, and they see what's happening, and it's before their eyes. And there are many instances which will be reported very shortly. There's tremendous litigation going on, and this is a case where they're trying to steal an election. They're trying to rig an election, and we can't let that happen. Detroit and Philadelphia, known as two of the most corrupt political places anywhere in our country, easily cannot be responsible for engineering the outcome of a presidential race, a very important presidential race. And we want an honest election, and we want an honest count, and we want honest people working back there, because it's a very important job. So that's the way this country is going to win. That's the way the United States will win. And we think we will win the election very easily. We think there's going to be a lot of litigation because we have so much evidence, so much proof, and it's going to end up perhaps at the highest court in the land. We'll see. But we think there'll be a lot of litigation because we can't have an election stolen like this. And I tell you, I have been talking about this for many months with all of you. And I've said very strongly that mail-in ballots are going to end up being a disaster. Small elections were a disaster. Small, very easy to handle election. We're hearing stories that are horror stories, absolute horror stories. And we can't let that happen to the United States of America. It's not a question of who wins, Republican, Democrat, Joe, myself. We can't let that happen to our country. We can't be disgraced by having something like this happen. So it will be hopefully cleared up, maybe soon, I hope soon, but it'll probably go through a process, a legal process. And as you know, I've claimed certain states, and he's claiming states, and we can both claim the states, but ultimately I have a feeling judges are going to have to rule. But there's been a lot of shenanigans, and we can't stand for that in our country. Thank you very much.
Elsewhere, Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden has urged Americans to remain calm as votes continue to be counted in the 2020 presidential election. Mr. Biden expressed confidence that his team will be declared winners when the vote is complete. Mr. Biden spoke at the Queen's Theatre in Wilmington, Delaware, after receiving briefings along with his running mate Kamala Harris on COVID-19 and the economy.
Good afternoon, folks. Senator Harris and I just completed briefings on both COVID and the economic crisis facing this nation. And we're reminded again of the severity of this pandemic. Cases are on the rise nationwide, and we're nearing 240,000 deaths due to COVID. And our hearts go out to each and every family that has lost a loved one to this terrible disease. In America, the vote is sacred. It's how people of this nation express their will. And it is the will of the voters, no one, not anything else, that chooses the President of the United States of America. So, each ballot must be counted, and that's what we're going to see going through now. And that's how it should be. Democracy is sometimes messy. It sometimes requires a little patience as well. But that patience has been rewarded now for more than 240 years with a system of governance that's been the envy of the world. And we continue to feel, Senator and I, we continue to feel very good about where things stand. We have no doubt that when the count is finished, Senator Harris and I will be declared the winners. So I ask everyone to stay calm, all the people to stay calm. The process is working. The count is being completed, and we'll know very soon. So thank you all for your patience, but we have to count the votes. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you so much.
Meanwhile, Ziki Miller, a White House reporter for the Associated Press, says the Biden campaign is more or less certain than they have won the key state of Pennsylvania.
The Biden campaign has been fairly calm and confident since election night. They seem to think that the math is on their side. Obviously, they're closely watching some of these returns come in, same way the Trump campaign is. But they are not reacting to every single thing the president or the president's aides say. They're trying to stay calm and level-headed and sort of let the math, from their standpoint, speak for itself. Pennsylvania is obviously the biggest prize out there right now, and for Joe Biden, if he wins Pennsylvania, the whole ball game is over. For the president, he needs Pennsylvania and a couple of the other battleground states to go his way. But so if Pennsylvania is decided, the whole ball game is over. The Trump campaign publicly is being is confident about Pennsylvania, confident about some of the other battlegrounds. Privately, it's a very different story. They're starting to come to grips with some of the math there. We're seeing trends, particularly in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, the race tightening, president's lead in election day vote, which we expected. Being whittled away day by day as mail ballots that were cast legally before Election Day have been counted. Those take a little bit longer to count, and they're counted after those Election Day votes. So as those come in, we're seeing the margins tighten, and potentially we may start to see Joe Biden take the lead. That's one of those things that we're looking for. Now, right now, there is no evidence of widespread misconduct or fraud or mismanagement of the electoral process. In fact, given the transition to mail balloting and all of the coronavirus-related changes to voting this year, it seems to have gone remarkably smoothly. There are potentially going to be isolated incidents of issues that come up. Those come up every cycle, but there's never, those usually affect just a couple of votes here and there. There's no evidence of anything widespread that would change the outcome of the race. So that is sort of, the president is obviously looking to sort of stay in the fight a little bit longer as these counts and as the tallying continues. But there is no evidence, no indication anywhere that these legal challenges will really materially alter the outcome.
I mean, what do you say about this, Tony? Because the numbers have whittled down so much. I was overnight on TV yesterday up till this morning, and I saw Georgia go from a sizable lead now to 1,703 difference between them. I saw Pennsylvania go from 115,000 to 60,000 to 45,000. Now it's 23,200, Tundu. Joe Biden is making a lot of gains.
Yes, which is why you have President Trump in a bit of a panic and making these rather outlandish statements that he's made. And it's so sad to say, two of the three big, well, the big three, as they're called in America, it's ABC, CBN, and NBC broadcasting companies, two of them cut away from him, CBN and NBC and MSNBC, while he was making those claims. And it just goes to show how this bastion of rectitude, which was the office of the President of the United States of America, how that luster has been dulled by Donald Trump. Did you ever think that the President of America would be generally perceived to be a liar? You know, fact checkers on deck 24/7. Look at his relationship now with Twitter, with Facebook, because of all these, you know, outlandish claims that he's making. And, you know, slander is my thing, really. But what Donald Trump is doing is not even slandering individuals anymore, which is his stock in trade. He's actually attacking an institution, a 244-year-old institution, the American democracy that the whole world has generally looked up to. He's basically throwing it into doubt because he's losing. And is this face-saving taking too far? I'm not sure, because it's really quite sad. The best thing I would have thought would be to behave like Biden and just be calm, wait for the votes to come in, just be calm. And if it doesn't go your way, graciously concede. The custom is to call the other person and congratulate them. That is what one would have hoped for, but that's clearly not going to happen. Donald Trump is not going to go gently into the night. He is going to take down the institution with him because he's enormously popular. Even with the debacle of his handling of COVID-19, you can see how close the election is. And it goes to show that without COVID-19, he probably would have won by a landslide. Yeah. I saw a T-shirt. Somebody was wearing a T-shirt in one of his rallies. My son died of COVID, but I'm still voting for Trump. That is to tell you the kind of cult-like following that he has. These people are going to believe every word that he says. And he's stoking a fire that he himself might not be able to contain if it does get out of hand. It's very worrying. What he's trying to say is that he's been robbed. They are being robbed. And you will recall what is his huge draw with his fan base. His iconoclasm. Trump is going to come in and drain the swamp. Okay. So people like that. He's telling them you cannot trust politicians. This is how he won in the first case. The whole system is rigged, and he's continuing. It's very worrying.
Okay, I just got a quick correction. It's 1,732 votes. That's the difference now, you know, in the state of Georgia, like I said before, 1,732.
Actually, in Georgia, it's 1,709.
Yeah.
But these are the issues. One, President Trump speaking yesterday, his statements were full of lies. Yeah. It was characteristically presidential, and he was lying. Some of the claims that he made were fact-checked. One, he claims that in Georgia and Arizona, that the Democrats were in charge there and trying to stop them. It is not true. Georgia and Arizona are actually states in the hands of, Republicans. And yet, in those two states, in Georgia, Trump is ahead, but the gap is narrowing. Yeah. And the gap that is narrowing, as at this morning, is 1,709. In Arizona, Biden is leading, but the gap is a vote of about 47,052, which means that Biden is likely to take Arizona. Some media outlets have already called Arizona for Biden.
Even Fox.
But we wait. Now, another lie that he put across is that the public is being blocked from monitoring the counting process in many of the states. That, again, is false. It is not true. He also claims that, Republican agents are not being allowed to monitor the counting. That, again, is false. So you see a president that is having a meltdown, if I may use that expression, and is using the platform of the presidency of the United States to tell lies. However, the indication is that, President Trump will remain a disruptive factor, an element in American politics. He's not planning to go away quietly. And even if at the end of the day he loses, as he would, you could still see him, trying to fight back. Some of his aides are even already talking about the possibility of him running again 4 years from now. So he's likely to keep up the pressure. And that is why it's a good development that Facebook and Twitter are blocking him. They're saying, look, we're checking political content and we will not allow our platforms to be used negatively. As it were, the United States, for the tech giants, has also become an at-risk country, like Myanmar and some of these other countries where social media is used to cause a lot of disruption. Now, I think, Vice President Biden is looking more confident. He's beginning to look presidential.
Yes.
And that's why I agree with Eric Miller that, in the Democratic camp, it looks like, they've already concluded that they are already there. Yeah. And they may well get there. Now, all of this that is happening was predicted before now by Bernie Sanders, Senator Sanders. There is a video out there which he made many months ago. And he said the election is going to come down to one situation, whereby you will have mail-in voters, pre-election day voters, voting heavily for the Democrats. And then you have in-person voting on election day going to the Republicans initially. And that a situation will occur whereby you will find President Trump claiming that he has won. But when the mail-in votes are counted, it will change. And I think that, Senator Sanders has been proven to be well on point, and his statement in that particular video has proven to be prophetic. But the mail-in votes will decide. But at this moment, what is the state of play? In Arizona, 90% of the votes have been counted. In Nevada, 89%. In North Carolina, 95%. In Georgia, 99%. And in Pennsylvania, also 95%. If you look at the differences, Trump is leading in Georgia with, as I said earlier, 1,709. In Nevada, Biden is leading with 11,438 votes. In Pennsylvania, the difference is about 18,229, and Pennsylvania is 20 electoral votes. In Arizona, Biden is leading with 47,052 votes. The electoral vote in Arizona is 11. Nevada is 6, where Biden, I said, is leading. So if at the end of the day, Biden is able to take Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona, because of the very small margins, that would be a total of 53 electoral votes. When you add it together, Biden just jumps forward with 306 electoral votes. But as we see it, it looks like Pennsylvania and Georgia will determine this election. And what you see from President Trump is an act of desperation on his part. Yes, let's say President Trump takes North Carolina, where he's comfortably ahead. North Carolina is 15 electoral votes. If you add that to what he has now, 214, he's nowhere. So we're not calling the election yet, but it looks like by the end of today, we will know what would follow.
I mean, many counties started coming in big for Biden in all of this. A very important county around the Pennsylvania area, the Clark County, around Georgia to some other counties, heavy Democratic counties, started coming in for Biden overnight. Take, for instance, in Atlanta, in Georgia, what changed the vote was the Atlanta metro area. When those votes started coming in big time for Biden, Biden started plateauing. In fact, at a point, Biden was getting a ratio of like 2 to 3 votes for every one Trump got.
In a usual Republican
space. In a usual Republican space.
But this is the thing. So you mentioned that lie. You mentioned the lie that was told about the governor of Georgia, who is actually a Republican. A lot of Georgia voters feel a lot of resentment about what happened to Stacey Abrams. People feel that she was cheated. Voter suppression, that allegation is still in court. People thought that was rife. So I think the black voters, the minority voters, the young voters really mobilized and came out in such force for Biden.
And I want to say a very big thank you to Stacey Abrams, because Stacey Abrams turned Georgia. After she was cheated, guess what she did? She went back, started doing a lot of voter mobilization, voter registration and the like. In fact, a lot of people attribute, if it goes the way of Biden, they would attribute this to Stacey Abrams' work.
I thought he would
Voter
actually pick
inclusion.
Abrams. I thought he would actually pick her as his VP.
She did a lot of work as
She's
regards for
formidable.
Biden.
She's so
In the U.S.
formidable, that
election,
woman.
it still remains an unfolding situation.
Yeah.
But what is certain is that it looks like Biden will win.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe at some point we'll get to a point where we'll begin to talk about Jill Biden, the next First Lady of the United States. And I've seen some memes around the place. Some people are saying the White House now is now forbidding. My Yoruba compatriots, they say bidding. I said, no, it's not bidding. It's Biden, But they say, well, it's already forbidding. And against Trump. But we'll see what happens at the end of the day.
I like that
didn't go, but you need to see a mock polls done in Obama's village in Kogelo in Kenya for Biden. You'll be sure. All right, that's all.
Biden, not bidding.
We'll take a short break now. When we return, we have the trio of Rotu Zudiri, Michael, we said this one more to give us updates on Africa global business.
Yeah, Biden.
Stay with us.
Get it?
Biden. Pleasure of your company on the Rise News channel. Our dependable Rotus Odiri is here to give us Africa business updates. Over to you, Rotus.
Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Tundu. We begin in Nigeria. Tier 1 bank, GTB, Guarantee Trust Bank, has put out a press release saying that they've received an approval in principle from the Central Bank of Nigeria in order to form a HoldCo structure. Basically, back in 2011, the Central Bank of Nigeria essentially repealed the universal banking license and urged banks, commercial banks in Nigeria, to essentially form a HoldCo structure as part of a risk mitigation measure in order for the central bank to promote a more sound banking system in the country. Essentially, a HoldCo company, if we can take a look at the HoldCo structure, if I even got this from their circular that they released back in 2011. So this is actually a HoldCo structure that the central bank put out. You can see the HoldCo parent at the top. A HoldCo basically is a corporation that owns controlling shares in another company. And those are essentially subsidiaries. You can see the HoldCo parent at the top. You've got commercial banking activities, merchant bank activities, insurance, asset management, and other permissible financial institutions. And then under commercial bank activities, you've got commercial banks, PMI, PFC. PMI, primary mortgage institutions, PFC, pension fund custodians. So it's risk mitigation that allows the HoldCo to still have controlling shares in those other companies. And then you can basically just spread out those subsidiaries and they can all operate separately. UBA has adopted that structure. Stanbic IBT has adopted the structure. First Bank has adopted that structure. And we understand that in addition to GTB, also I think Sterling Bank is also looking at adopting that structure. So again, they put out the press release letting the public know that essentially that they are close and they have an approval in principle, not only from the central bank, but also from the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, since GTB is, of course, a publicly traded company. So it's again, in line with what the central bank put out years ago, risk mitigation measure that allows them to form a structure that should work out pretty well for the financial institution. And we should see more banks pick that up as well. You just talked about the elections. Social media now, Facebook is looking at tightening election content. So essentially what's been going on, not only in America, if you look at what's been happening in other African countries, there's been some concern. So, I mean, if we take a look at some African presidents that have been making the news here. Mr. Alassane Ouattara of Ivory Coast just recently won a third term. He tweaked the constitution in the Ivory Coast that limits presidents to 2 terms to a third term. This is Mr. Alpha Condé in Guinea back in October. He also tweaked his constitution, allowed him to run for a third term. Interesting enough, him and Ouattara both assumed office in 2010. Then Mr. Museveni, Yoweri from Uganda, has been in office since what? 1986. Recently, Bobby Wine in the Ivory Coast, who is supposed to be his opposition, was recently attacked by police after declaring that he was going to run. So that's another thing. And then, of course, we've got, I'm putting him in with the African leaders here, Mr. Donald Trump and his election speech that he made, another second speech he made yesterday, which the three of you just spoke about extensively. Facebook is essentially, one, going to make sure that before you share election content on social media, you might have to go through a voting information center. It is going to force you to actually click through a voting information center to understand that you know what it is that you're about to share and that it is credible. Beyond that, I understand that Facebook's algorithms behind the scenes might actually try to restrict certain videos that are shared on their platform. Doctor, I think I heard doctors talk about countries that are at risk countries. I think Myanmar, Ethiopia, there are a couple other countries down there. Who knows if the United States is going to be added to those countries, but they are tweaking it. There's a tweet here from a data journalist from The Economist. His name is G. Elliott. There's a tweet he put out where he talked about Twitter. Hey, there it is. Twitter has told us not to call the Electoral College result this year, but I'm logging off and finishing my post-election articles now, if that tells you anything. The writing is on the wall. Really, it's been since early Wednesday. He's been projecting. He's a data journalist, so he takes polling data and so on and so forth. He's been going through the counting. He's already projected that Biden is going to take he said he's not only going to take Pennsylvania, he might also take Georgia as well. So, but Twitter has said you can't call it in order not to spread, in order not to raise angst. So the social media companies are really pushing things forward here to try to temper things down. Speaking of tempering things down, this just came out hours ago. This is an affiliate, WPVI, in Philly. They're an affiliate of ABC News. They put this out about an hour or two ago that a police probe had apparently probe an alleged plot to attack the Philadelphia voting counting center. They've already arrested a man in relation to this. Apparently, there's a Hummer with some people who are driving from Virginia, armed, looking to attack the center in Philadelphia where they are counting the votes. And if you listen to Trump's speech, which was a racial dog whistle, he said that Philadelphia and Detroit cannot be trusted to handle this election process properly. These are both African-American centers, democratic strongholds. So it shows you the danger of what Trump's speech is doing, and this what's being spread on social media, and how measures have to be taken in order to limit this. So that speech is one of the scariest speeches I've heard in my life. And if you see what's happening in Philadelphia now with the arrest that was just made in Philly, with people planning to attack where they are planning to vote, it tells you where things are right now.
I mean, it just shows to a large extent. Oh, sorry.
Go right ahead.
It just shows to a large extent how Trump has divided this country and called America. And with that speech he made yesterday, Trump knows what he's doing. He's a master gamesman. He's deliberately doing it to be able to discredit the election, still, inflame his fan base, and go ahead and disrupt things. He said it. We'll go probably up to the Supreme Court. We'll twat everything. We'll twat the process. Trump wants chaos in the system. He wants disorder. He knows that if that disorder starts before the Electoral College starts to meet, then there's going to be a big problem. He knows if that disorder also starts before they have some reruns, like they're going to have for some Senate seats in Georgia in January, he knows it will work in his favor. And that's what you get when you vote in a populist. A populist never cares about the country, even if he says it's the country first. A populist is more concerned about his own personal self-aggrandizement. In his mind, Trump doesn't lose anything, and he's not going to lose this for him.
Yes, and it's like you would compare to African countries because it's giving African potentate vibes. I mean, in Nigeria, the messaging is always defend your vote, which is what we're seeing in America. In Nigeria, it sounds very familiar to us when a vote has been counted and announced, and the powers that be don't like the way the elections are going, and they try to stop it. So we've seen this before. Lindsey Graham has come out to say he's donating $500,000 to President Trump's legal defense fund, saying Philadelphia is as crooked as a snake. All this horrendous language. It's really disgraceful.
Well, Rotus, what I see here is that, President Trump is desperate, as I said earlier, and he's doing everything possible to delegitimize the presidential election for this year. He wants to raise enough questions of legitimacy, and Trumpism, he wants to pump that up, and he has enough base. Yeah, he's popular. He's won 67 million votes, one of the highest number of recorded votes in history. Now, the danger in all of this is that the United States already might be effectively an at-risk country in the same category as Myanmar, Ethiopia, and Sri Lanka, as classified by Facebook and Twitter. And that's why it's important that those tech giants are stopping Trump. And we need to worry about the effect of Trumpism even beyond the election. But thank you also for drawing attention to something we have overlooked in the last few days, focusing on the United States. The crisis also in Africa. In Cote d'Ivoire, you mentioned President Alassane Ouattara, who purportedly won an election the other day, an election that was boycotted by the opposition in that country. He wants to do third term. He wants to renew the idea of a presidency for life. And I've not heard the African Union condemning that. Maybe at some point, when this election debacle in the United States is over, we'll need to focus on Cote d'Ivoire.
Yes.
And how Alassane Ouattara is gradually transforming into a dictator.
Yes.
In spite of his,
he's a dictator already. Call him what he is.
Cosmopolitanism. And then Tanzania, where John Magufuli has also, rigged himself back into power. And there also, the opposition is complaining. The main opposition party is saying that that election is fraudulent. I hope that as we discuss the United States, we'll also focus on the electoral fraud that has occurred in Cote d'Ivoire and in Tanzania.
How can a candidate get 94% of the vote? That's what Alassane Ouattara got.
In some areas, 99%.
It's appalling.
94%. In some areas, 99%.
Can you, we have to go on to thank you so much, Rotus. We have to go on to Michael Wilson now for joining us from London. Michael, good morning.
Morning. Well, bearing in mind all your political discussions, the world's financial markets appear to be moving back to pre-election future, quite honestly. And that was all about tech stocks, of course, working from home, megatrend, outperforming everybody else. That doesn't change. And also a tsunami, if you like, a tidal wave of monetary policy, loose monetary policy, which the FOMC, thus the Fed, reinforced last night. And a scramble by investors, really, for anything that gives over, 0% of yield on capital. So therefore, we're going to see a lot more action in the stock market, mixed in Asia, still mulling over the election in the United States and so on. Mainland China retreated very, very slightly, maybe slightly weighed down with that cancellation we were talking about Ant Financial's IPO being cancelled by the Chinese government. We didn't really get a chance to talk about that yesterday, or indeed the day before. It is quite an important one, this, because Jack Ma, who is the man behind Ant Financial, obviously behind Alibaba, was his ambition when he started was always to create the largest bank in China. And I think the Chinese authorities have actually said to him, and their reason for cancelling the IPO, which is very unusual, is because they didn't want it to overtake the People's Bank of China. Japan household spending recovered on a monthly basis, still lower though year on year. China releases its balance of trade on Saturday, and Alibaba, now that report is an interesting one. This actually reported cloud computing brought in a revenue of $2.24 billion. They express it in yuan, but I give it in dollars. In the 3 months ending September, that's a 60% year-on-year rise, faster than Amazon and faster than Microsoft as well in terms of cloud computing. And Alibaba reiterated their talk that its cloud computing division is likely to become profitable for the first time in this current fiscal year. So where are we? Well, US yields are falling. Obviously, stocks are rallying. Emerging markets are rallying, more or less. An impressive jump in precious metals. I'll come on to that. Wall Street, more of the same, really. The one overriding view, of course, though, given the FOMC is going to continue with its quantitative easing, is the dollar will fall in 2021 a lot. That's the feeling at the moment. The impasse in Washington, D.C., the US recovery is bound to underperform, and Asia will outperform because it's tucked up with China. Overnight, then, the FOMC last night, hinted that more easing is on the way, likely in December, left everything unchanged, but it still reiterated the fact that we won't be seeing pictures like this for a long, long time, and the record daily levels of the pandemic rising in the US without any hope of the stimulus package actually getting together at all. As far as the UK is concerned, more money from the magic tree. Businesses want clarity as to when the lockdown is actually going to end. It's slated for December the 2nd, but gyms, hotels, pubs, restaurants, non-essential shops are worried, non-essential goods shops are worried that it might stretch to Christmas. I have a problem with this word non-essential. Clearly, in an economy which depends upon consumer spending, every purchase is essential. I think it's sophism to pretend there's any difference between essential goods and non-essential goods. We would like pictures like this. We're not seeing that now. That street does not look like this, even as we speak. Furloughs changed again. I was telling you about the magic money tree. The Chancellor will extend that now, paying 80% of a person's wage, up to £2,500 a month, and that will finish in March. It will be reviewed in January, but it's going for much. It costs £6 billion a month. And many people are looking at this saying, you know, a lot of fraudsters have actually got hold of this money. A lot of organised crime's got hold of it as well. And you have to question whether the £150 billion more in quantitative easing is actually going to help an economy. You tend to use quantitative easing for private industry rather than what's going on in the economy. And again, I have a real problem, as I said yesterday, with this avalanche of data we're getting. There are more and more questions being asked about, well, how can the Prime Minister actually say that this pandemic lockdown will be over by December the 2nd if you can't actually go from week to week defining what the true level of the pandemic is, whether the hospitals are overwhelmed, the rest of it. There's too much information around, and it's being just as you were talking, Doctor, about the way in which politicians and populists do it, not for the country but for their own benefit. Too many of these scientists, I think, in this country are doing this for their own benefit rather than worrying about the likes of you and me and the general populace. Commodities, oil fell. That's because no fiscal stimulus package is expected in the United States. That's just a straight demand thing. But risk has actually helped, and the dollar in full retreat as well. Treasury yields down, as I said. That's helped gold and precious metals. At 1949.90, I make it announced this morning, which is getting towards that 2000 figure. And of course, the day ahead. Now, things will rapidly change. It's the non-farm payrolls, the big job numbers in the United States at lunchtime today. And it really depends on what that's showing about the US economy. That'll mark, I think, where the stock market will go next week, and also give some potency to whatever politicians decide to do in the United States about that stimulus plan.
There's a question I wanted to ask you yesterday, and as we watch the United States election, that question becomes even more relevant. What do you think could possibly be the implications of a Biden presidency for the energy sector, particularly with regard to crude oil and fracking and all those issues within that sector?
Okay, so what Biden will do is it'll be more predictable if he's in the White House, clearly. There'll be a fairly stern attitude towards Russia. There'll be a very stern attitude towards China. I don't think that'll change at all. As far as oil's concerned, we would look ahead, I think, to the Green Summit in this country, which our Prime Minister is looking forward to in the autumn of next year. And he's hoping this will be a sort of coming out party as far as Brexit is concerned. I think that what Biden will do will be to engender the green agenda, which is bad news for oil. I don't think oil is particularly going to recover until, quite obviously, demand increases. Who can say when that's going to be? So I feel as though there won't be an enormous amount of change. Remember, the Senate probably will still be ruled by the Republicans. So we're not going to get an enormous amount of change there. But I think a more predictable White House will be welcomed by everybody.
All right, thank you so much. And I like that phrase, agendering the green agenda. Adesuwa, who is agendering the vaccine agenda this morning?
Well, a lot of people are pushing for vaccines to be ready. In fact, in some places, we're hearing that we might have them as early as December or early January, talking about the AstraZeneca vaccine. But that's just one of many around the world. Good morning, guys. Talking about the world, we recorded a shattering number yesterday, over 600,000 infections globally, pushing that total infection to 48.6 million. At this rate and at this trend, we might actually be hitting the 50 million mark before the week is over. We also recorded over 8,000 deaths yesterday. But a lot of people are watching the tallies from the hotly contested election in the U.S. The people in the U.S. are watching. Globally, we're watching. We're also talking about it. But there's another tallying that is increasing, and that's the tally for the COVID-19 infections in the U.S. For a second day in a row, the U.S. has recorded over 100,000 cases. Yesterday, they recorded 121,000 new infections, and that is the third time they are doing this in a week. You will recall that back in June, the country's top infectious diseases expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, had said back in June, the country was averaging 42,000 cases a day, but he said at that point that a day like this will come when they will be averaging 100,000 cases. We guess Dr. Anthony Fauci wasn't an alarmist, after all, as it was described by President Trump at that time. Away from the U.S., it's beginning to look like deja vu all over again. I mean, countries putting measures in place to slow down the rates of the virus spread. Lockdowns are being reimposed. Border restrictions are also being reimposed, and China is championing that. Well, China yesterday said it is barring all non-Chinese travelers into the country. It says, especially those from the UK, non-Chinese travelers from the UK, indeed, will not be allowed into the country. China has largely contained the outbreak and seen its economy begin to recover. He says this is a temporary measure taken in response to the current pandemic. Also beginning from Friday the 6th, new rules for negative tests and antibody tests are imposed for all passengers from the US, Germany, Czech Republic, and France. Then on the 7th and on the 8th, passengers from Denmark, Australia, Singapore, and Japan will also have those measures put in place, subjected to those same rules. And still in, let's go back to Europe now, where a senior World Health Organization official, Catherine Smallwood, yesterday said that there are now indications that mink are susceptible to the coronavirus and quite good at becoming reservoir for the virus. Now, the WHO was reacting to the decision by the Danish authorities to cull about 17 million mink at more than 1,000 farms after Danish researchers tracked mutations of the virus in the mink. What this means is that there's a risk of this particular mink population across Denmark in some way to contribute to transmission of the virus from minks into humans and then go further from human to human transmission. That will not be good for Denmark and countries around the globe, really. The Scandinavian country is the world's biggest producer of mink fur, and its main export markets are China and Hong Kong. Now, the country should be commended considering the economic impact this will have on them. We're talking about 17 million of those mammals. And then to Africa, where although the continent has been spared of the worst of coronavirus infections with just under 2 million cases and about 48,000 deaths, but the WHO is saying that there is a knock-on effect on other health indications and other health services in Africa. Dr. Moeti, who is the head of the WHO in the African region, said there was a preliminary analysis of the WHO of 5 key essential service indicators, and they include outpatient consultation, inpatient admission, skilled birth attendance, treatment of confirmed malaria cases, and provision of combination of pentavalent vaccine in 14 countries. Now, that preliminary report found out that there was a sharp decrease decline by more than 50% in these services between January and September this year compared with 2 previous years. The gaps were widest in May, June, and July when countries put in place lockdowns to check the spread of the coronavirus. That report particularly also included Nigeria as part of the 14 countries, and it says, for instance, there were 310 maternal deaths in health facilities in August alone, and that nearly doubled the amount recorded in the same month in 2019. Also, Dr. Moeti said, for instance, 1.3 million children missed their first measles vaccinations from January to August compared to last year. That is huge.
That is huge, and it's extremely worrying. I cannot overstate what a disaster that could be. But regarding the farmed mink, it's happened in Sweden, Spain, and America, Utah, to be precise. They've had to cull the mink as well. And it's another reminder that, yeah, you're right about Denmark having to take this huge financial blow because the export value is worth 0.5 billion euros. But it's yet another reminder that humankind must watch our relationship with animals. You know Ebola is a zoonotic disease. Yes. COVID-19 is a zoonotic disease. The next pandemic, which there will be one, will also be a zoonotic disease. And it goes back to climate change. And our relationship with animals is extremely important.
Well, it's difficult, Tundu. Minks are very, very lovely.
Well,
no, they're not. Nobody should be wearing fur in the first case.
Mink used in clothing and also used for cosmetics and oil. Yes, there's a lot of economic impact involved. But you would have to note also that you could have animal rights campaigners coming up and raising questions about what Denmark, is trying to do. In the UK, for example, there are laws elsewhere also, laws protecting animal rights. But here, I guess Denmark is acting in the public interest.
Yes.
It's a matter of public policy, a matter of public safety. And what it shows is that, the coronavirus, we still do not know enough about it yet. It continues to mutate because the whole scientific point in Denmark is about mutation, about animal to humans transmission and human to human transmission. China wants to stop people coming from Britain, from the UK into China. Isn't that ironic?
The audacity.
Isn't that ironic?
They have the nerve.
Yes, I won't go beyond that. But what we should note is that there are exceptions.
Yes.
Special cases, visas, that they talk about, will be available. As for Africa, yes, Dr. Moeti has raised the issue about the challenge for the health system. But it's not just Africa that is affected. But I think we need to worry about that in Africa because Africa's health infrastructure has always been fragile.
Yes.
And in the face of COVID-19, the vulnerability of the health infrastructure in African countries, has been well exposed. Now, many cases have not been attended to. In the face of COVID-19, maternal morbidity has gone up, infant mortality has gone up, and all of that, according to Dr. Moeti, the WHO representative for Africa, is something we have to worry about. But also, in Europe, we've seen health systems being overstretched by COVID-19 in Spain, in Germany, in Italy, and even in the United Kingdom. There have been concerns about a rise in obesity, a rise also in cases of cancer patients.
Yeah, because they're not picking the cases.
Screening.
Over 6,000 of them who have not been able to go for screening across the United Kingdom. So I think this is a wake-up call, particularly for African countries. But the other leg of it that you need to worry about, that people talk about, is that with COVID-19, African leaders who tend at the slightest sign of heartache or toothache or whatever it is,
they go abroad.
or malaria, they go abroad to seek a treatment. Right now, African leaders have seen that all of us are in this together.
Oh, yeah?
Stuck together.
The rich and the poor, the plebeian and the aristocratic, nobody can go anywhere. We are here.
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
maybe that will be a wake-up call for African leaders after now to worry about, the quality of health infrastructure across the continent.
All right, thank you so much, Adesua. It's just sad. It's a cold, cold world, like Elton John was saying.